everyone, Amer back with part 4 of the big ranking list of Mission Impossible episodes. Let's get right to it after the brief intro. In case you're wondering what's going on, I urge you to go back to the beginning of this playlist and go to the introductory video so you get a feel for what's going on and start with part 1 before you start with this one. Okay, picking up where we left off. Number 135, Season 4, Episode 20, Terror. Propaganda Minister Vassier of Surak is planning to release terrorist Ismet El-Kabir as part of a political ploy, and the IMF must prevent it. I had this one much higher before, primarily because of the good guest cast. There are a lot of quality actors in this episode who have been in a whole smattering of other episodes to various degrees of entertainment and success. Not their fault if they're saddled with a bad script. This one is a fairly lackluster and slow plot. It can be a little bit difficult to follow at times. The actors do try to make the best of it with their abilities. But frankly, there's nothing in this episode that we don't see better done elsewhere. The highlight, I think, was supposed to be a drawn-out nitroglycerin extraction scene, which, while scientifically accurate, does seem like padding for the sake of padding. This is just another A-Team episode, this time with some explosions, and there's nothing really to write home about here. Why it's better than episodes that preceded? Definitely it is because of that good guest cast. It is a good idea for a story, but like Nitro, which we had a little while ago, a little bit lacking in terms of the execution, and the plot just doesn't come together. Number 134. Season 4, Episode 26, The Martyr. The IMF must expose the efforts of Corinthians Premier Anton Rozak, who intends to exploit a student congress for his own propaganda purposes. John Lark is the villain here. He's been in tons of episodes. He starts this one off okay, which is refreshing, because he doesn't just grab the pennies from heaven that the IMF provide him in terms of an opportunity, the lost son of his country's previous leader. He doesn't just fall into the IMF trap just blindly. He does do some due diligence, which is good, but he completely loses all of that competence towards the end, completely becomes a schmuck. The whole youth and counterculture vibe, which the writers were certainly going for, this being the turn of the decade into 1970, it just doesn't really strike the right chord. Again, it kind of tries to be two things at once and doesn't really strike the right vibe with either side, I feel. What's good about this one, it's better than the previous episodes because of said competence shown by Anton Rozak, the premier, at least at the beginning of the episode, which leads to a neat sequence where Barney basically has to do some climbing work and get close enough to Jim so that he can feed him information through an ear implant. That part of it was pretty cool. Number 133, Season 7, Episode 4, Leona. A federal agent's cover has been blown and he is being held by mobster Mike Apollo. The IMF must use a rivalry between Apollo and Joe Epic to get the mobsters to bring the agent out so that he can be rescued. This one's got a pretty decent guest cast. We've got Robert Goulet as Joe Epic. He does an admirable enough job to try and carry this episode for what it's worth. There's just not a lot new here. It's an interesting idea to get the mobsters, put them in a position where they're forced to get this agent to surface so that he can be rescued. That was creative, and it's different than what we'd seen before. But other than that, everything is pretty much old hat for the IMF. This one is better because of that decent guest cast. Robert Goulet, we have Dewey Martin as Mike Apollo, and we even have Will Kulva, an old standby, as another mob boss. and it's got a sensibly executed plot, even if it is derivative of older episodes. Number 132, Season 1, Episode 6, Odds on Evil. Prince Ibn Costas is a ruler of a tiny principality, and he's buying arms to invade a neighboring country for its oil. The IMF must stop the deal and bankrupt Costas. This one is focused around Ibn Costas, who is played by Nehemiah Persov, who is a fine actor. We lost him earlier this year. But he is a schmuck through and through in this one, just like the other episodes he guests in, and we'll see those later. Nico Minardos is very ordinary as a guest agent here because this is when Stephen Hill started to be Stephen Hill. And the plot here is definitely below average. It's nothing spectacular, nothing to write home about. There isn't much of a challenge for the team in this one, despite it taking place on the villain's home turf. This one's better than previous episodes we've talked about because of Nehemiah Persov. He may be a schmuck, but boy is he an entertaining schmuck. He's lively. This guy knows how to act. He knows how to emote, and his facial expressions are really, really great. And I got to give him credit for that in this one, and I'll mention it in the other ones as well. Number 131, Season 1, Episode 7, Wheels. The IMF must undo planned election rigging in a Latin American country so that the results are legitimate. This one also has nothing really to write home about either. It's the first time we've seen it because it's a very, very early episode, but the techniques and the gadgets and things like that are used over and over again. It is the first time we actually see one of the team, in this case Barney, in physical danger. He takes a bullet, which is what creates most of the tension in this episode. There's also a romantic interlude between Cinnamon and a Rollin lookalike, which is important to the plot, but for my taste, that takes up a fair bit too much TV time. This one is better because of the suspense related to Barney. Is he going to be able to complete the mission or not? And also we've got good guest stars in Mark Leonard and Percy Rodriguez in order to drive the action. Number 130, Season 6, Episode 3, The Tram. The IMF must put money laundering syndicate leader Hatcher and his muscle man Thorne out of business. This one has a decent guest cast, but again, like many of the episodes in this block, nothing new here, nothing too special here, except for a couple of small things. Felice Orlandi returns, and this plot is very much like his previous outing in Season 4, The Crane. Very, very standard separate and mislead plot. It's a prototypical example of how the writers seem to be content in many cases to just find a setting, namely the tram itself, which is at a resort in Palm Springs from what I understand, and just structure an episode around it. And in this particular case, the tram seems like more of a crutch than a plot device that actually makes the episode better. This episode is better than previous episodes because the tram scenes are at least visually pretty neat. I'll give the producers credit for that. And also, there is one piece of gadgetry here in terms of a device that can actually detect the way that tumblers move on a safe so that it can be opened later. And that's something that actually is reused in future episodes. So that is one thing that did come out of this episode, which was a bright spot. Number 129, Season 7, Episode 3, The Deal. The IMF must thwart the plans of General Hammond, who is conspiring to overthrow a friendly government with syndicate help. This one is a pretty plotty episode. Most of the guest stars do not have a great presence in this episode. Not even Lloyd Bachner as Hammond, who is usually at least good at conveying emotions with his face and mannerisms. He doesn't get too much of an opportunity to do that in this episode. His cronies basically get manhandled by the IMF as things progress. The script isn't very good, and the lackluster performances reflect that. This one is better because Willie has a subplot, which is actually quite interesting. That was good. In terms of being injured and then having to kind of recover from that. This episode has Lana Wood as a character named Marcy Carpenter. She is a really good bright spot in this one. And also, there is some suspense until the end because the IMF is looking for an object which hides until the very end of the episode. So that was good. Number 128, Season 1, Episode 9, A Spool There Was. Rollin and Cinnamon must find and safely recover critical evidence another agent left hidden on a reel of recording wire before said agent was killed trying to escape. I know that this one is a polarizing one for a lot of fans. Some people love it for the same reason that they love other episodes. I've always said, like what you like, that's great. For me, this one is not very good. It's missing the team aspect, which I feel is key to the show. I think that this plot is a better fit for a different kind of spy show. I just don't think it fits the Mission Impossible mold very well, and that's why I'm putting it down at this level. I don't feel the plot was necessarily that great either, and so that's why I stand by it. It's better than previous episodes, certainly because Martin Landau and Barbara Bain work well together and have tremendous chemistry on screen for obvious reasons. And their escape at the end, the final sequence, don't want to spoil it for anybody maybe who hasn't seen it before, but if you're here watching, you know that it involves some balloons and a boat, is actually pretty neat and clever. I'll give it credit for that. Number 127, Season 5, Episode 6, My Friend, My Enemy. Paris is recognized and captured by an enemy agent and is given an implant which will lead him to kill his control agent. We have Leonard Nimoy in the limelight here with what ends up being a romantic foreign interlude. It certainly is better than Lover's Knot. How could it not be? The suspense, such as it is, lasts until the end, which is good too, but I find the action to be rather plotty. The main comment I made in the review for this one is that this is a little bit jarring and out of place, mostly because the IMF is reacting rather than acting. And that often does not make for a good episode. This is a good example. They're not doing anything. They're kind of waiting for things to happen. This one is better than previous episodes because of a few reasons. First of all, despite the fact that the execution is below average, it's a good idea to have an episode about an agent being captured by the enemy. That was neat. There is a great sequence in a trade commission building by Dana, Barney, and Doug. I really, really liked that part of the episode. And also, there are some flashback sequences for Paris when he was learning magic tricks and that sort of thing that are also visually very neat. Number 126, Season 6, Episode 4, Mindbend. The IMF, mostly Barney, must put the duo of syndicate member Pearson and unscrupulous psychologist Burke out of the business of creating assassins who commit suicide after being triggered. This one is too slow for my taste. The biggest letdown here are the villains. They are not menacing. I pointed out that I can't even call them lame schmucks. They're just hapless nitwits, frankly. We have Leonard Fry, who plays Dr. Burke. He had, until season 7, the most punchable face on the show. He's a complete whiner throughout the episode. It's a complete turnoff. And then we have Donald Moffat as the syndicate guy Pearson, who shows absolutely no formidability. And that is where this one kind of falls apart. Like the previous one, this one, great idea, just not very good execution. It's better because of that great idea, despite the bad execution. And there's a couple of sequences which are really, really good. One is the opening sequence where we see an assassin kind of being created and sent out into the wild. And Barney, when he goes through kind of his brainwashing sequence and techniques, he has a really, really good show of acting, kind of like a ferocious animal. That was kind of interesting as well. Number 125, Season 6, Episode 6, The Miracle. Mobsters Taylor and Kearney are the only ones who know where a massive drug shipment is coming in, and the IMF must intercept it to put them out of business. To do so, they have to convince Kearney that he's had a heart transplant from a priest, which has turned him good. Did it hurt as much to listen to that as it did for me to write it? If you ever are confused about what I mean by schmuckery ruining an episode, this is the one that you want to watch. You have 3 actors as a group of villains who are excellent. You've got Joe Don Baker, you've got Ronald Feinberg, who's been in lots of episodes, and you have Billy D. Williams. And I commented in my full review that what the producers did here with Billy D. Williams is a crime against something. I want to say humanity, that might be overstating it just a little bit, but it's a crime against something. And I mentioned in the review that there was potential here. They got some of the key points right, but again, the execution is just terrible in this one, and the schmuckery just ruins the episode. It's better than previous episodes before just for the entertainment value. When you have actors who are this good, you can't really say that they're not good to watch. I enjoy watching these guys perform, but man, it can be tough to sit through this one. I'll just give credit to the actors in this particular case for the entertainment value. I think I'm going to wrap this one up here. On my list that I'm looking at on my spreadsheet, I've kind of completed up to the level of grade of D. I still got to go through the D pluses. That's coming next. And there's a lot of them. I don't know if I'm going to get through them all in one video because I want to keep them a little bit short. I know it's tough for people to sit through a 20-minute video, but we'll see how it goes. Please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already so that you get a notification when the next part of the list is up. And please leave your comments about these and other episodes. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.